Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Rebel Talk podcast. I'm your host, Zach Mareth. Today we are back with co-host Dalen Flowers. We got a lot of breakdown starting from Ole Miss men's basketball to Ole Miss women's basketball. And then finally, we're going to touch up on the national championship, which took place. Ohio State defeated Notre Dame 34-23 for the win last night. Pretty exciting game for the most part, especially at the end there until Ohio State pulled away. But I want to start with some Ole Miss related news here, Dalen. I want to take the fans back into last week when Ole Miss basketball went to Tuscaloosa and defeated Alabama in a stunning fashion. Again, fans were talking on Twitter. It's tough to remember a game where Ole Miss they weren't really expected to win. They went in there and won, and fans had a hard time remembering the last time that happened, especially in the sport of basketball. They defeated Alabama, like I said, held them under 70 points for the first time in 50 plus straight games, I believe. And the thing I like the most, Dalen, is that they finished the game in style. And that's exactly what you need to do when you're in March Madness. You look at those situations, those close game scenarios. You have to make your free throws. You have to inbound the ball cleanly and play fundamentally sound basketball. And that's what Chris Beard has allowed this team to do. And a huge shout out to Jamin Brakefield for going, I want to say 100% or close to 100% from the free throw line in the last 3 to 2 minutes there in the game. But I wanted to get your initial thoughts and, your overall impression from the win against Alabama, Dalen.
Yeah, it was big. You made a great point about free throws. Ole Miss went 14 for 16 from the charity stripe against Alabama, which is huge. And I think continuing that momentum was going to be big. I won't touch on it too much right now, but that's kind of a big asterisk in my opinion of why Ole Miss lost to Mississippi State in Starkville over the weekend. But a huge win for Ole Miss and Chris Beard. I cannot emphasize that enough. Their first road top 5 win in the history of Ole Miss basketball, and solidifying that point, going 4-0 now 4-1 was huge. I wholeheartedly believe there will be a team in the SEC this year that will make it to the NCAA tournament, and they'll go 7-11 in conference play. Quality wins are huge, and beating Alabama on the road in the fashion that they did too. I think that when you look at basketball in today's era, especially college basketball, it's so hard to defend within the spacing of the game, the amount of three-point shots that are now being taken within basketball, and even the transition basketball that especially played in the SEC is hard. So for Chris Beard and his players to go out there and commit 21 turnovers against
Yeah.
the number one scoring offense in the country that was putting up at least 90 points per game, to limit them to 70 points was huge. And it was big. A big night for Malik Dia. I think it kind of solidified him as being one of the best players in the conference and in the country. And I think it solidified Ole Miss in proving that they can compete with any team in the country. And how do they do that? They have to play their best brand of basketball. We saw that against Alabama. And what does that consist of? That consists of playing pesky defense. That consists of rebounding the ball really well. That consists of making free throw shots and not forcing offense when it's not needed. I think that first 10 minutes against Alabama was a little bit of ups and down. And I thought that Ole Miss kind of came back within the last 10 minutes of the first half against Alabama and really just kind of put their foots on their throat. And that's needed. It's the same thing in football, baseball. Every second, every moment, every inning, every half matters. And I've seen this Ole Miss team continue to adapt. They still need to work on those first 10 minutes. I think that was huge against Mississippi State. But playing Alabama, Nate Oates is one of the best minds in college basketball. It was a huge win. And in the fashion that Ole Miss won, really, in my personal opinion, put the nation on a mark to say Chris Beard has done it again at another program.
Yeah. And, like you said, before that game, myself included, and the rest of the fan base, were kind of wondering, where does this Ole Miss team sit? They played Purdue really close. They beat BYU. They went to Louisville and won by 20 plus points. They smacked Arkansas on the road. So where do they actually stand against Alabama? And then, you go and force 20 plus turnovers, Dalen. That's like basically unheard of in today's era of college basketball against a team consisting of Nate Oates and some incredible future NBA players. But unfortunately, all good things come to an end. We know that. And apparently, that's what went down in Starkville on Saturday. It was a really rough start for the Rebels. I believe I looked at the scoreboard and it was 14-2.
Yeah.
You can't start that way on the road against your rival, Dalen, and expect to come away with a win. And despite, again, forcing 15 turnovers, which is just an unbelievable stat from this defense, They came up short, but Matt Morrell made it really interesting. He tied the game up with under 10 seconds. That was an unbelievable shot. I know I was out in the square, and when you're celebrating a shot like that with an entire fan base and one restaurant, I'll call it, there's nothing like it. You know what I mean? So it was fun. Fortunately, couldn't come away with it, but I think it shows the competitiveness, like you said, Dylan. The SEC is legit this year, and I want the fans to keep in mind here. Mississippi State was coming off of a home loss to Kentucky and a road loss to Auburn, which was never close. And I mean, never close. They went to Auburn and got absolutely demolished. So their backs were against the wall. Their biggest rivals coming into town after Ole Miss just defeated Alabama. They had a lot to play for, and they came out and they proved it. So credit to Mississippi State. But I will say, when the Bulldogs come to Oxford, I kind of expect exactly what happened last year, but the flip side. So I think Ole Miss is going to take care of business, and I don't think it'll be as close as it was the first game. I think Ole Miss will do it in a pretty decent fashion. At least I hope so. But Malik Dia was very inconsistent. We just talked about it. Malik Dia has the potential to be one of the best players in the country, and then he puts up 8 points with 2 rebounds. Chris Beard mentioned it in the post game, but he saw a lot of out of character behavior from Dia, whether it was taking shots, shooting up, pulling up from the mid range. It seemed like he wasn't using his size and strength, and every opponent's different. But that was the look we got from Dia. So, the message from Chris Beard was consistency, because he's an effective player and surely a fantastic one who's going to be a marquee guy for Ole Miss down the stretch here. But just for you, Dalen, I know you went live after the game, but what kind of happened in Starkville on Saturday?
Man, in my opinion, an early candidate for game of the year in the entire country. I mean, it was a back and forth game. Like I just said, those first 10 minutes were critical for Ole Miss. I thought they literally couldn't have started the start of the game worse than they did in the first 10 minutes. But they bounced back with the last 10 minutes of the first half, cut the lead down to 8 going into halftime, and they gained some momentum. You make a great point about Malik Dia. And Malik Dia and Matthew Morrell in the first half combined for 2 points. And Ole Miss can't win that way. Simply, I think we have a lot of threats: Sean Padulia, Dre Davis, Jamin Brakefield on this team. But I truly believe that Malik Dia and Matthew Morrell are the two go-getters of this team, and they enforce a lot on both sides of the ball. So when those two guys are struggling on the offensive end, I think it also takes a toll on the way they commit themselves on defense as well. And I saw that in the first half, but I don't know what Chris Beard said in the halftime speech, but it got them together, and I saw them both be different animals in the second half. And when I say that, I don't just mean, scoring more. I mean, setting pick and rolls harder, making the extra pass better, seeing the vision of the defense and where I needed to attack better, making transition plays better. I still thought Matthew Morrell could have done a few things different. I don't mean to take a knock from him. I mean, the shot to send the team into overtime was huge. His capabilities to even do that, his confidence to even take that shot is huge. But I still think he has another part of his engine that he hasn't unlocked yet. Like, I'll go back to a point, I think later part of either the second half or overtime, where he kind of lays a ball up and he gets blocked. And I'm like, I've seen Matthew Morrell dunk that before. And, there's times that I think that he has another part of his engine to rev up, but he hasn't yet. And that can be a good or bad thing. He could be saving a little bit of juice for the later part of the season. But I think still the best is yet to come for Matthew Morrell. So I'm still excited for him. But, I love what Matthew is, because he can have a horrible first half, but in the second half, he can act like it never happened. But how do we find consistency, like you said, with Malik did? How do we find from the moment the game starts to the moment the game ends? And we know that's never going to happen every single game. But how do we find more consistency for Matthew Morrell, which is going to be huge? I thought Jamin Brakefield played a great game. A few minor mistakes at the end kind of drive into the hole when it wasn't necessary. But I think he's a vital part to this team. And I think that his size, his shot-making ability, his ability to score from the charity stripe as well. His length on defense is huge for this team. His pick-and-roll ability is huge for the offense. I think that Jamin Brakefield is a crowd momentum guy. When we're playing at home, he's one of those guys like Kalafke that, gets the pavilion rocking. I love that. And you need those guys on your team. So I'm excited for the way Brakefield played against Mississippi State over the weekend. I hope that he can keep it going against Texas A&M on Wednesday. It's going to be needed because A&M has a lot of paint presence. And if Brakefield can get in the post, score a few buckets, but get that mid-range going as well, that's going to be huge. And you talk about Malik Dia, man, he's been great all year, but I saw him settling for a lot of shots in the first half against Mississippi State that I had seen him done before, even in the Alabama game, but he continued to do it over and over again. I just kind of question why. Every now and then it's okay to take those wide open shots, but I've seen him put the ball on the floor, make a move, get to the rim. Even if he misses a layup, gets that offensive rebound, puts it right back up. I've seen him do dominant things when he puts his head down, puts his shoulder up, and gets to the rim. But when he's taking those threes, it kind of puts the defense out of whack. The opposition gets a rebound and transition play goes, and we have to do a lot of running, which I don't think is our best scenario on defense, but it works. Sometimes it doesn't. I think this kid has great shoulders on his head, but sometimes he has to slow down, just like Brakefield, and just kind of let the offense come. But it was a fun game for Ole Miss. I don't want Ole Miss fans to take that loss as sour. I thought that after the first 10 minutes, it was questionable that they should even still be in the game. So for Ole Miss to come back and make it a game and send it into overtime was huge. It says a lot about their heart and character. So Ole Miss will be just fine. Champadulia is going to need a big time game against A&M as well. I thought he was great, but those last couple minutes, especially in overtime, couple questionable shots and playmaking abilities. But I think Chris Beard kind of got into him in that moment. I'm sure he has done so over the week as well. So I'm sure we'll see a great game from Sean Padulia. But one big thing is free throw shooting. I said 12 or 14 against Alabama. They went lower than 50% against Mississippi State. Had to make free throws. They really do. And rebounds. Mississippi State out rebound Ole Miss 51-29. That's huge, and it felt like every position Mississippi State was getting offensive rebounds. So how do we control the free throw shooting and the rebounds? Those are going to be the two huge things against Texas A&M.
Rebounding, Dalen. I want to touch on that as we head into the Texas A&M preview here. Texas A&M leads the SEC in offensive rebounding. They are very physical, and they were the exact same way last year.
Yep.
I was actually very surprised when Ole Miss went down to College Station and won at Texas A&M last year. I was shocked, to be honest with you. They're physical. They're going to play hard. They're going to play very, very aggressively in the paint, and it's something that we're going to have to adapt to relatively quickly. Now, I do believe there are a couple things pulling nicely here for Ole Miss. Look, against Alabama, you forced 21 turnovers. Against Mississippi State, you forced 15. I think if you can force 15 or more, you put yourself in a really good situation to take the ball out of the A&M's hands offensively. Sorry, I can't talk. But at the same time, it's going to generate a lot of momentum that Ole Miss hasn't had this year. For folks who don't understand, this is the first game that students are back, that people are coming back from vacation. It's an 8 p.m. tip. It's going to give a lot of people time to get to the game. The pavilion will be rocking, and I can assure you that. I know I'll be in attendance. It's going to be a good time. But this is going to be an energy and a presence that I don't really think Chris Beard and this team has felt all year long. So hopefully, the students and the fans do end up making a relatively big impact in this game. But in terms of names to know for Texas A&M, there are two guards, Wade Taylor and Zerky Phelps. They lead the team in minutes played and points per game. They can shoot it. They can score it. They can drive. They're very versatile. But at the same time, you have guys like Sean Padula, Dre Davis, Matt Morrell, who are elite perimeter defenders. So I don't think that's going to be too much of a problem. But A&M, look, here's what they've done recently. They lost to Kentucky and Bama in conference, and then they also beat Purdue earlier in the season, a team who beat Ole Miss. So this is going to be a very competitive matchup. It's going to be fun to watch. It just feels good, man. College basketball season is here, Dalen. And as much as I love football, basketball is a little less stressful because you have, quite a few more games. So I'm just looking forward to getting in there and screaming my head off tomorrow night. But looking at A&M, I wanted to get your thoughts, just some insight that you can provide to the fan base, what to expect from the Aggies.
Yeah, I'm excited for this. Buzz Williams has been one of my favorite college coaches ever. And so A&M has always been a consistent team since his tenure there. This is going to be a fun game. A&M has beaten, like you said, they beat Purdue, a team that we lost to. They have a quality win against Creighton, Oklahoma as well. But a few losses, like Zach said, against Kentucky and a few other teams as well. I think for Ole Miss, how do you start the game off strong? How do you get the pavilion going? And like Zach said, this is the first game. Students will be back 8 o'clock tip off. So it gives time for people and the kids to get off work, get off school, have dinner and get to the arena an hour early. I think momentum is going to be huge for both teams. Buzz Williams kind of likes to slow it down in those first 10 minutes of the first half, but going into halftime, I see his teams a lot pick up the intensity, pick up the physical play, and really go boneheaded. Buzz has always done that in his career. it's going to be a physical game. How are we going to win this game in the trenches? I think that momentum starts it, but transition play is going to be huge. You have to limit it, the 3-point shots. Like Zach said, they have 2 elite guards, and we have elite perimeter guards that played really good defense on the perimeter, and that's going to take a toll. And I say that because I'm not really concerned that Ole Miss's defense is not going to be elite. How do we put the same pressure that we do on defense to the offensive side of the ball? That's where the efficiency has lacked. That's where we missed so many shots wide open against in the first half of Mississippi State that if we made a couple of those, it could have been a completely different game. How do we knock down the open shots? How do we not force turnovers? How do we continue to make the extra pass and set the guys up offensively that need the ball to go on the rim early to do that? I thought that, Matthew Morrell and Malik Dia, they struggled in the first half against Mississippi State, but I didn't see us really put those 2 players into set plays, especially when they continue to struggle. Get those guys going early, get
Yeah.
a couple set plays going for them. Let them see the ball go into the hoop and let their momentum and their juices get flowing, because it's going to be huge. This is now the latter part of the season for Ole Miss. They have A&M just came in off Mississippi State and Bama. Now they got Missouri coming up after A&M. It's going to be huge. This part of the season is now the rough part of the season. And this is what you play the best conference in basketball for. But A&M is mighty. They're tough. They're big. They're strong. They're fast. And it's not going to be an easy game. But if Chris Beard and his players can play their type of brand of basketball, and on top of this, stick to the game plan. I saw too many unnecessary shots that Ole Miss took in both halves of the game, and
Yeah,
even
I
overtime
agree.
from Ole Miss. And how do you not take unnecessary shots? And that's from behind the arc. That's in the mid range. That's driving to the post. Slow down, make your offense happen. You have 2 full halves. You have a lot of basketball to play. There's never a need to force something unless it's absolutely that moment in time to do so. So it's going to take a lot from Ole Miss to do it. I think that Ole Miss is definitely able to do it, but don't undermine this Texas A&M team. They have a lot of quality players. They have a quality coach. They have a quality resume as well, and their insights are March Madness, and they want a deep March Madness run. It's been a few years since Buzz Williams has had that in A&M, so they're looking to have some tournament success this year too. So this is a team. Essentially, if you can prove a good win as well, another quad 1 win for Ole Miss will be huge moving into the latter parts of getting ready for February. And then before you
Yeah.
know it, SEC tournament play will start. And then before you also know it, it'll be March Madness time.
Another huge resume builder on the line tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Be sure to tune in if you can't be in attendance to cheer on your Ole Miss Rebels. Transitioning here into the women's team, Coach Yo and the Lady Rebs are 13-5 up to this point, coming off some massive wins against Florida and Mississippi State. Look, you can say what you want about the team, but the end of the day, this isn't a team you want to face in the SEC tournament or March Madness. There's been losses to Alabama, early losses in the season to USC. I believe he lost on the road to NC State. Losses happen, but I think at the end of the day, Coach Yo and this team, who's really getting propelled by an exciting freshman, along with the experience that comes with them, is going to provide them, a lot of ability to grow throughout, not only throughout the season, but also as we transition into the postseason and the NCAA tournament. But I know Dalen's been on site for a lot of these games, so just fill us in, Dalen. What have you seen from Coach Yo on the Ole Miss women's basketball team?
I'm seeing the momentum pick up right now. Beating Florida and limiting Liv McGill, who, Zach talked about our outstanding freshman, Shiratino and Liv McGill are those 2 young ladies that are battling for SEC Freshman of the Year. Liv was averaging 16 points, which is second in the conference. Just came off a 21-point triple-double the game before Ole Miss, and Ole Miss shut her down, only had 11 points, went 4 for 12 from the field. And Shiratino had like a 29.7 steal game. So that was huge for Ole Miss. And also going down to Starkville, a competitive game for Ole Miss and a back-and-forth game. But the history's been there between these 2 head coaches. There's been a lot of back and forth over the last couple of years. So that win was huge. And it was huge for Madison Scott. My personal opinion, Ole Miss runs how Maddie Scott runs. And, she said to me in the press conferences right before conference play started that she'd been horrible. She said that from her own chest that she had been horrible. And, my personal opinion, there were things that she could be doing better, even from the start of conference play. And I saw every aspect of her game click against Mississippi State, a 30-point game for her, which was a career high. If I can continue to see her do that, hit that mid-range shot, hit a few shots from behind the arc, get to the hole, and make a tough play and make a tough bucket, or even kick it out when needed, I think Ole Miss is really set for a prime hot streak right now. They have Texas coming into town Sunday at 2:00 p.m., which is going to be a huge game. Texas has developed a resume and a great coaching staff over the last few years, and they've continued to put up successful years under their staff. So it's going to be a huge game. But Ole Miss is on the right track. Obviously, a couple early conference losses that kind of put people in a bind. But Coach Yo is just kind of reminding people just to stick with them. You know, they've gone through the trenches with this team. They've gone through the wars with this team. And I'm right there with her. I've seen the momentum pick up. I think there was still a lot to figure out with the team and the roles and a completely new staff within the conference play starting. But now I'm seeing this team pick it up on every aspect. It's going to be huge for them going forward to knock down open shots, just like the men's team. This All Miss women's team has a lot of athletes. They play defense really well, just like the men's team. But I'm seeing them force a lot of shots and also miss a lot of shots wide open from behind the arc, which accumulated them to losing a few of their other games throughout the season. So that's going to be huge. And one big thing for the women's team is how do they control the game in the last 2 minutes of the game? There have been so many close games that they could have or should have won, but those last 2 minutes are vital, and they just didn't successfully sustain what type of basketball they want to play. So Coach Yo's thing is rolling right now. The offense is clicking on every cylinder, and obviously her identity for defense is marquee. But how do they do that well against Texas on Sunday? They're going to have to play their type of basketball. That's going to be aggressive and getting to the line, and also not hesitating taking the open shots.
Spot on, Dalen. Again, these are the basketball program's in an electric spot right now with Chris Beard and Coach Yo. Two teams with very, a lot of veteran presence. Like I said, two teams you're not going to want to face in March. So for the fans out there with any sort of concern, my message would be to trust the process and come out and support. Like I said, the men's take on A&M tomorrow at 8 p.m. The women's will host Texas at 2 p.m. on Sunday. So be sure to come out and show your support. The final segment I want to dive into, Dalen. We had the national championship game between Ohio State and Notre Dame. A couple former Rebs did a pretty damn good job, if I don't say so myself. Quinshon Judkins finishes the game with 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. Could have been argued for offensive MVP, but it was given to the quarterback, Will Howard. And Davison Igbinosun, former defensive back for Ole Miss, finished with just 2 tackles, but he's been a menace for the Buckeyes all year long. It's clear, Dalen. When you have a team, especially a defense consisting of seniors and guys who have played together for so long, and then you're able to fill those holes on offense with a guy like Jeremiah Smith, a backup running back in Quinshon Judkins, and a starting quarterback in Will Howard, that's a pretty good recipe for success. So really a credit to Ohio State. I think they showed the mold of what college football teams should be in terms of trying to find success. I thought we saw flashes of that with Ole Miss. But the problem, I think, this year was a lot of the defense, a lot of guys on defense, though they were experienced, didn't have that experience playing together. And you can say the same thing on offense, even though, there were a lot of returning guys along the offensive line. There were numerous transfers who didn't have that experience, playing for the same coach, playing with the same teammates, all sorts of different types of things, mixing and matching it up, which can cause problems. But Ohio State figured it out, did a hell of a job, limited Notre Dame for essentially the whole game. That first drive, Riley Leonard did a nice job commanding that offense of Notre Dame. But after that, it was nothing too crazy. It felt like Ohio State was coasting and controlling for the majority of the matchup. So credit to the Buckeyes. But man, I'm upset the college football is finished, Dalen. But before we get into how upset we are, I want to, just talk about the game, dissect it a little bit, and hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, man. Probably one of the craziest college football seasons of my lifetime. It was super fun. Props to Ryan Day. I genuinely feel like the world kind of collapsed on Ohio State after the Michigan loss. So for those players and staff to combine back together after that huge loss, and run through the playoff the way they did is huge. And I have to give props to Ryan Day. I myself questioned whether he could get it done, and it was going to be a really big hit on him because I don't think if they didn't win this year, he was going to keep his job. I thought in my personal opinion, this was the best roster in college football. And after the Michigan loss, I'm like, okay, where do they go from here? They got in and they took care of business. They beat Tennessee, took care of Texas. I played a really, really fun game against Oregon, in my opinion. I know it was kind of a blowout, but I thought that was kind of the mecca, maybe one of the best regular season games between those two teams, and then got the job done with Notre Dame. So I got to give props to Ryan Day and Quinshon as well. The stories that go back and forth between Ole Miss fans and Quinshon. Regardless, I wish the best for him, and I'm happy for him. Great kid and a great running back as well. But this sets the standard for Ole Miss. The word is going around that Austin Simmons posted on his Instagram last night that Ole Miss will be here soon, and he marked his words by that. How do we continue to build? And that's going to be huge moving forward. We saw what Ohio State can do with the transfer portal, with guys like you said from Ole Miss, Quinshon Judkins and Davis and Igmanosin, a lot of other guys, Caleb Downs, the transfer portal guy. It can be done. And I think that was kind of the sour part for Ole Miss, that we have the capabilities of getting it done, at least making the playoff and making some type of run. I can't say that Ole Miss had the ability to win it all, but they had the capability of doing more damage than a Gator Bowl win against the Duke Blue Devils. So it's a fun time to sit back and kind of watch college football. Congratulations to Ohio State. I also want to give props for Notre Dame. You kind of look back and you watch them lose. I watched the game against NIU, and I'm like, there's no way they can move forward. They come back. What a season! What a season for Riley Leonard! What a season for Marcus Freeman, who, in my opinion, just now established himself as one of the top minds in the game.
Easily.
And that comes from me. I don't really like Notre Dame, but I have much respect to that team this year. They played their hearts out, and coming off one of the worst losses from a power school, they ran the table. And they knew what they had to do after the NIU loss, and they did it, and they controlled their own destiny. They will be back. I trust and believe that. I think Marcus Freeman is going to adapt. He's going to recruit at another high level, and now players see what you can do in Notre Dame and play for a great coach like Marcus Freeman. They will be back. It was a fun game. Ohio State obviously got out to that early lead, and Notre Dame came crawling back. Unfortunately, I don't know if this is going to be the end of the 12-team playoff. I think we may just had a one-year run with it. I think 16 teams will be adapted in the next year. So it was fun while it was. Obviously, a lot of controversy with it this year, which made for a lot of dramatic conversations and sequences and scenarios for people. But it was a fun season, incredible season. And I'm, like you said, I'm counting down the days for the first game day. So I'm excited for it.
Yeah, man, 220 something days. It pains me to say it, but it was fun. It was fun to not only watch the national championship game, but obviously also watching Ole Miss for the entirety of this season. We got more transfer portal stuff coming your way. We got spring ball coming up. But until then, really, wow, that is totally my fault, guys. Got to go change the laundry. But like I was saying, until then, come support Ole Miss hoops. Like, this is a very serious team who hasn't been serious in really, I want to say almost decades, Dalen. Ole Miss is, when you think of Ole Miss, it's baseball and it's Lane Kiffin and football. And, you can go back the decade and say Hugh Freeze. But really, Chris Beard's done an incredible job, and, even Coach Joe for the women's as well. So I'm glad we got to discuss that. Really two big games for them. Like I said, A&M, 8 p.m. tomorrow for the men's. That is a Wednesday. And then Sunday, the women's are hosting Texas at 2 p.m. I apologize for those who just got their ears demolished from my alarm. We're going to move on from that. But again, I appreciate you guys tuning in. Dalen, do you have anything else?
Oh, man, like Zach said, make sure you show up to the Pavilion on Wednesday and on Sunday. You can't make it, please sell your tickets to Rebel fans. We want to make the atmosphere one of the best in college basketball on both sides. So both of these teams deserve the support. They both played out their minds, and they have a good chance to make March Madness and do some damage in them as well. So come out and support. Every aspect, every seat needs to be filled. So hotty toddy, y'all.
Hotty toddy, guys. Thank you for listening, and go Rebs.